Hello everyone, this is an emergency broadcast with intense updates on the historic floods in southern Austria. This morning, we received the first images of an unprecedented disaster, as raging floodwaters swept away everything in their path. This horrifying scene has submerged hundreds of homes, trees, and infrastructure. Streets that were once bustling have now turned into a sea of water. People have no choice but to leave everything behind and flee in despair. Are we witnessing an unprecedented collapse of an entire region? We have just received information from the St. Pon area, where within just a few hours, a large dam broke, causing a massive flood that swept through villages and towns. 19 people were forced to evacuate last night, leaving everything behind without time to pack anything. In the blink of an eye, water flooded their homes, taking all of their belongings. Fortunately, up to this moment, there have been no reports of casualties, but the material damage continues to increase. Houses that once provided shelter for many families are now just shattered ruins, submerged in water. Meanwhile, in cities like Williamsburg, Bochum, Pyra, and many others, the situation is no less severe. Local firefighters are tirelessly battling to rescue those still trapped. In Williamsburg alone, over 130 rescues have been carried out in the past 24 hours. But this work seems never-ending. The rescue teams are being pushed to the limit as the floodwaters keep rising, engulfing the entire area. Houses are being swept away by the floods, while residents scramble in panic to find safe shelter. We have recorded 4 deaths caused by the floodwaters since the disaster began. This number could continue to rise, as many people are still missing. Rescue teams are working tirelessly, but the harsh conditions are making rescue efforts extremely difficult. A veteran of civil defense shared that this is the 51st time he has been activated for an emergency mission, but he has never witnessed such a destructive and violent flood. The federal military has been mobilized since yesterday morning, with helicopters from the Air Force, including 2 Black helicopters. Rescue teams are racing against time to evacuate people trapped in dangerous areas. However, the situation is worsening as the water levels continue to rise. The helicopters can only rescue small groups of people, while hundreds of others are still calling for help from rooftops or are completely isolated in a sea of water. The power and water outages are making this disaster even worse. Areas like Pyra, Markersdorf, and Hindorf have completely lost access to clean water. The residents there are not only facing the dark floodwaters but also have no drinking water or food supplies. They are living without electricity, without water, and without any means of communication with the outside world. Rescue teams are still trying to reach them, but the raging floodwaters are hindering all their efforts. We have received reports that in areas like Markersdorf and Hindorf, up to 500 houses have been submerged by floodwaters. Local rescue forces have had to urgently evacuate residents, while the pressure from the water is putting many houses at risk of collapse at any moment. We are witnessing a century-defining flood, which is not only sweeping away property, but also threatening the lives of thousands of people. This morning, we received news from the St. Ton district that a large dam had broken, causing a sudden flood to sweep through residential areas. The force of the water not only swept away houses, but also completely destroyed infrastructure. The scene in St. Ton is truly horrifying. The ground is collapsing, water is flooding every street, and buildings are crumbling in front of the helpless residents. A major rescue operation was launched at 11 a.m., but the situation remains extremely dangerous. Residents in Pyra and nearby areas are living in a state of despair as basements are flooded, homes are submerged, and there is no way to escape. Firefighting teams are working around the clock to pump water out of the basements, but the water continues to rise, surpassing all human efforts. The power of nature seems too overwhelming to control. We have received reports from isolated areas like Williamsburg and Bochum, where floodwaters have turned every road into a sea, cutting off all communication with the outside world. Residents are struggling to survive under extremely harsh conditions, lacking food and clean water. Some have attempted to use makeshift boats to navigate through the floodwaters, but the risk of drowning is ever present. At the Tal's Relief Center, more than 300 people have taken shelter in the cramped, makeshift rooms of the exhibition hall. They have nowhere else to go and no idea when the flood will end. Men, women, and children sit together in extreme tension, their eyes filled with fear and worry for the future. Will they be able to return home, or has everything disappeared beneath the floodwaters? Relief efforts are still underway, but rescue teams are facing an enormous challenge. The floodwaters are too strong and too fast to control. Disaster relief trains from Amren, Brownell, and Chichen are trying to reach the area, carrying essential supplies. But time is not on our side. Will these relief trains arrive in time to save those who are still trapped? Firefighting teams are facing immense pressure. They have no time to rest, as with every passing minute, more houses are being swept away by the floodwaters, and the water levels continue to rise. They are racing against time, and with each hour, the risk of more houses collapsing grows greater. Entire urban communities are completely isolated, and residents in areas like Hindorf and Pyra are still waiting for help. Many families have lost everything, left with nothing but fear and despair. For them, every passing hour feels like an endless nightmare. We have witnessed heartbreaking scenes of people calling for help from their rooftops, but only the floodwaters responded. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still closely monitoring the situation and will continue to provide updates on the latest developments. But the question now is not just whether we can stop this disaster, but how many lives will be lost before this catastrophe passes. This is not just a flood, but a disaster that is shaking an entire region, a painful memory that no one will ever forget.